Imagine carrying a backpack filled with stones you can't remember putting there. Every step you take, it weighs heavier, yet somehow it feels familiar, almost comforting. That's what the past can do. It lodges itself in our minds, in our hearts, in the quiet corners of our nervous system, shaping who we are and how we move through the world. Sometimes it whispers lessons we need. Sometimes it screams regrets we can't seem to silence. We replay moments over and over, conversations we wish had gone differently, decisions we wish we'd made another way, holding on to them as if they define our present, as if letting go would mean erasing a part of ourselves. But what if the very act of holding on is what keeps us from stepping fully into life? What if the freedom we crave is not in rewriting the past, but in understanding why it refuses to leave? The neuroscience of memory provides crucial insight into why we find it so difficult to let go of the past. Memory is not a simple filing system where events are stored neatly and retrieved unchanged. It is an active, dynamic process that involves multiple brain regions and is deeply intertwined with emotion. The hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure located in the brain's temporal lobe, plays a central role in forming, organizing, and retrieving memories. It allows us to encode experiences, linking sensory input, what we saw, heard, or felt, with the context in which they occurred. However, the hippocampus alone does not determine the persistence or emotional weight of a memory. That function is heavily influenced by the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, which attaches significance and intensity to experiences. When an event carries strong emotional content, the amygdala signals the hippocampus to prioritize its encoding, making it more vivid, more detailed, and more resistant to forgetting. This connection between emotion and memory explains why moments of intense joy or deep pain remain etched in our minds long after they occur. It is not just the factual content of the memory that persists, but also the emotional tone. For example, recalling a past failure can trigger the same physiological responses, elevated heart rate, tension, or a sinking feeling in the stomach that were present during the original experience. The brain does not fully distinguish between memory and reality. When a memory is recalled, the nervous system responds as if the event is happening again. This makes letting go of the past psychologically challenging because the brain experiences these memories not merely as abstract ideas, but as tangible, emotionally charged events that demand attention and energy. Another factor that strengthens the hold of memory is the process of reconsolidation. Each time a memory is recalled, it temporarily becomes malleable, allowing for modification before being stored again. This process means that memories are not static snapshots, but are constantly reshaped by current emotions, perspectives, and beliefs. While this offers an opportunity for healing and reframing, it also reinforces patterns of rumination. If a memory is repeatedly recalled in conjunction with fear, anger, or regret, the emotional intensity is renewed and strengthened. Over time, this creates neural pathways that become increasingly dominant, making the memory more accessible and harder to release. The brain essentially practices the act of remembering, and through repetition, the memory becomes embedded as a habitual, automatic thought. Neurochemical mechanisms further reinforce the persistence of emotionally significant memories. Neurotransmitters such as norepinephrine and dopamine are involved in signaling the importance of experiences to the brain. Norepinephrine, released during moments of stress or arousal, enhances memory consolidation, making emotionally charged events more memorable. Dopamine, associated with reward and salience, can also amplify the perceived significance of certain experiences, whether positive or negative. These chemical processes explain why some memories, both joyful and traumatic, feel as vivid and immediate as if they occurred yesterday, while countless neutral events fade almost instantly. The nervous system essentially flags these experiences as essential for survival or identity, which can make letting go feel like a threat to the continuity of self. Additionally, memory is inherently selective and reconstructive. We do not recall events in perfect detail. Rather, we reconstruct them using fragments of sensory input, context, and emotion. This reconstruction is influenced by current mood, beliefs, and biases, which can amplify negative or painful aspects of the past while minimizing neutral or positive details. Over time, this selective reconstruction can distort memories, exaggerating their emotional impact and solidifying their grip on the mind. The more we dwell on these reconstructed memories, the more entrenched they become, as neural circuits associated with these recollections are repeatedly activated and strengthened. This explains why some people find themselves stuck in the past, reliving experiences in ways that feel unavoidable and real. The interplay between conscious and unconscious memory also contributes to the difficulty of letting go. Implicit memories, those we may not consciously recall but which influence behavior, emotional responses, and expectations, can perpetuate the influence of past experiences. For example, a person who experienced rejection or criticism may unconsciously anticipate similar outcomes in current relationships, even if they cannot explicitly remember the triggering event. These implicit memories are stored in brain regions such as the basal ganglia and cerebellum, which are less accessible to conscious thought, but exert a powerful effect on emotional and behavioral patterns. The persistence of implicit memory reinforces the sense that the past continues to shape the present, making it feel as though letting go is not just a matter of choice, but a physiological impossibility. In sum, the neuroscience of memory reveals that our attachment to the past is deeply rooted in the architecture and chemistry of the brain. Emotionally charged memories are encoded, reinforced, and reconstructed in ways that make them vivid, persistent, and influential. The hippocampus organizes these experiences, the amygdala amplifies their emotional weight, and neurochemical processes signal their significance to the nervous system. Reconsolidation and selective reconstruction further strengthen their grip, while implicit memory ensures that even unremembered experiences continue to shape our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The past, therefore, is not simply a collection of events we can discard at will. It is an intricate web of neural connections, emotional significance, and habitual thought patterns that the brain treats as essential to our identity and survival. This biological and psychological framework underscores why letting go is not a matter of willpower alone. It requires conscious awareness, intentional reframing, and sometimes therapeutic interventions that address the nervous system and emotional processing alongside cognitive understanding. Emotional attachment to the past is a powerful force that can make letting go feel almost impossible. Humans are inherently wired to form attachments, not only to people, objects, or places, but also to experiences, narratives, and memories that have shaped who they are. These attachments serve an important evolutionary purpose. They provide continuity, identity, and a sense of security in an uncertain world. When experiences carry intense emotional significance, whether positive or negative, they become deeply intertwined with our sense of self. Holding on to them, even when painful, can feel like holding on to a piece of our very being. Letting go, in contrast, can trigger feelings of loss, not just of an event, but of identity, connection, and meaning. This is why individuals often cling to the past despite suffering. The attachment is less about nostalgia and more about the emotional scaffolding it provides for their inner world. Attachment to past experiences is reinforced by the brain's reward system. Positive experiences, such as moments of love, success, or safety, activate the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reinforcement. This creates a neurological loop that encourages the brain to revisit and hold onto these memories, seeking the comfort and satisfaction they once provided. Even when the memory becomes intertwined with pain, such as the loss of a loved one or the end of a meaningful relationship, the emotional intensity continues to maintain its grip. The amygdala, which regulates emotional processing, keeps these memories salient, making them difficult to forget or detach from. The nervous system, in effect, treats these experiences as vital information that must be preserved, even if revisiting them evokes discomfort. Negative experiences also create strong emotional attachment, often because the mind equates them with lessons, warnings, or unresolved needs. Trauma, betrayal, or regret can create a psychological that resonates long after the event has passed. The emotional charge associated with these experiences ensures that they remain central to thought patterns, sometimes intruding involuntarily into daily life. The brain interprets these memories as critical to survival or social functioning, reinforcing the attachment. For example, someone who experienced rejection may ruminate on the event repeatedly, seeking understanding or closure, even decades later. The emotional attachment is not to the act of suffering itself, but to the perceived importance of the memory and its implications for personal safety, identity, or social belonging. Attachment is further reinforced by the psychological concept of consistency and continuity. Humans construct self-narratives, mental stories that integrate past experiences into a coherent sense of identity. These narratives provide meaning and stability, helping individuals understand who they are, how they have changed, and what lessons they have learned. Letting go of a significant past experience can feel like unraveling a thread in this narrative, creating a sense of discontinuity or existential disorientation. For example, someone who identifies strongly with a past achievement, relationship, or failure may fear that releasing attachment to it will diminish their self-concept. The past becomes inseparable from the present self, making emotional detachment psychologically challenging. The social dimension of attachment also plays a role. Shared memories, rituals, and relationships create bonds that anchor individuals to their personal history. Family traditions, friendships, and cultural experiences reinforce emotional connections to past events. Letting go is not only an individual act, it can feel like breaking ties with communities, roles, or expectations that are intertwined with these memories. The fear of social disconnection adds another layer of resistance, making the act of moving on appear threatening to both personal identity and social belonging. Emotional attachment, therefore, is deeply relational as well as personal. Cognitive patterns amplify emotional attachment to the past. Rumination or repetitive thinking keeps memories alive in the mind, continuously activating the associated emotional responses. When the mind frequently revisits past experiences, analyzing what went wrong, imagining alternative outcomes, or longing for what was, the neural pathways related to these memories are strengthened. This reinforces attachment, making the memories feel more vivid, real, and essential over time. Even when the individual consciously recognizes that holding on is painful, the habitual nature of rumination perpetuates the emotional bond to the past. Therapeutic approaches to understanding and managing emotional attachment often focus on both awareness and integration. Practices such as mindfulness and emotional labeling help individuals observe their attachments without judgment, acknowledging the significance of past experiences without being overwhelmed by them. Cognitive reframing and narrative therapy allow for reinterpretation of past events, integrating them into the self-concept in ways that reduce their hold on emotional energy. Gradually, these methods enable individuals to honor the past while disentangling identity and self-worth from experiences that may no longer serve them. Emotional attachment to the past is a natural, adaptive aspect of human psychology, rooted in survival, identity, and meaning-making. Positive and negative experiences alike create bonds that the brain and nervous system interpret as essential, often reinforced through rumination, narrative construction, and social ties. This attachment ensures that memories remain vivid and influential, shaping perception, emotion, and behavior long after events have passed. Understanding the mechanisms of emotional attachment clarifies why letting go is not a simple act of willpower. It is a complex process of disentangling identity, meaning, and neural patterns while respecting the emotional significance of what came before. Unresolved trauma exerts a profound influence on why we struggle to let go of the past, embedding itself not only in our memories, but also in the nervous system and the very way we experience the world. Trauma is not merely an event that occurred in the past. It is an ongoing imprint on the mind and body that persists long after the original experience has ended. When someone experiences trauma, whether through abuse, loss, accident, or betrayal, the nervous system responds as if survival is at stake. The amygdala, responsible for detecting threats, becomes hyperactive, signaling danger even when the immediate environment is safe. This heightened vigilance conditions the individual to remain attuned to triggers and potential threats, reinforcing a connection to the traumatic past and making it difficult to fully move on. Trauma also affects memory consolidation and recall. Events that are highly stressful or emotionally intense are often encoded differently than ordinary experiences. The hippocampus, which organizes and contextualizes memories, can be disrupted under trauma, leading to fragmented or incomplete recollections. As a result, individuals may recall certain aspects of an event in vivid, isolated snapshots while struggling to place them within a coherent narrative. This fragmentation contributes to a sense of unresolved tension and confusion, as the mind is drawn repeatedly to incomplete or emotionally charged pieces of the past. Each recollection can evoke the physiological and emotional responses associated with the original trauma, reinforcing its grip on the present. The nervous system retains a body memory of trauma as well. Traumatic experiences are often stored somatically, meaning that the body remembers even when the mind struggles to articulate the event. Muscle tension, hyperarousal, startle responses, and chronic anxiety are manifestations of these stored experiences. When confronted with reminders, whether direct triggers or subtle cues, these physical memories can activate the same stress responses as the original trauma. This phenomenon explains why some people feel emotionally or physically stuck in the past, experiencing persistent discomfort or fear without consciously recalling every detail of the trauma. The body itself holds the past, and letting go requires not only cognitive processing but also bodily awareness and regulation. Psychologically, unresolved trauma fosters repetitive thought patterns and rumination. Survivors often replay events, analyze their role in the outcome, or imagine alternative scenarios in an attempt to understand, control, or prevent future harm. These mental loops create a persistent connection to the past, reinforcing the sense that the trauma remains present and active. Rumination is intensified by cognitive distortions such as self-blame, catastrophizing, or overgeneralization. The individual may internalize the trauma as a defining aspect of identity, believing that the past event dictates their worth, capabilities, or safety. This intertwining of trauma and self-concept makes emotional detachment feel threatening or even impossible, as letting go is perceived as erasing a part of oneself or neglecting lessons learned. The emotional landscape shaped by unresolved trauma is equally compelling. Trauma often generates feelings of fear, shame, guilt, anger, or grief that remain unresolved. Because emotions are closely linked to memory, these feelings continue to activate neural circuits associated with the traumatic event whenever the past is recalled. The result is an emotional echo that persists for months, years, or decades, amplifying the perception that the trauma is ongoing. Even moments of peace can be punctuated by intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, or emotional surges, reinforcing the attachment to the past and the difficulty of moving forward. Social and relational factors further reinforce the grip of unresolved trauma. Trauma can create patterns of mistrust, hypervigilance, or avoidance in relationships. Individuals may unconsciously seek out reminders of past experiences, either through repeated exposure to similar situations or by interpreting neutral events as threatening. These patterns perpetuate the psychological connection to the trauma, creating a cycle in which the past continually informs present interactions. Moreover, societal stigmas or lack of understanding may prevent individuals from processing trauma openly, isolating them from support systems and prolonging the influence of past wounds. Healing from trauma requires addressing both its cognitive and physiological imprints. Therapeutic approaches such as somatic experiencing, Trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy (EMDR) and mindfulness-based interventions aim to help individuals process the memory, regulate the nervous system, and integrate the traumatic experience into a coherent narrative. By gradually confronting and reinterpreting traumatic memories in a safe context, the brain and body can learn that the event is no longer an immediate threat. This process reduces hyperarousal, diminishes rumination, and allows the individual to reclaim aspects of the present that were overshadowed by the past. Unresolved trauma demonstrates that the past is not merely a collection of memories, but a living presence within the nervous system, emotions, and behavior. It shows why letting go is not simply a matter of choice or forgetting. It requires addressing the physiological, cognitive, and emotional dimensions of the experience. Trauma imprints itself in ways that make the past feel active, immediate, and inseparable from the present, ensuring that attempts to move on without processing it fully are often ineffective. Understanding trauma's pervasive effects provides clarity on why release requires patience, intentional strategies, and often guided support. Cognitive biases and rumination are central to understanding why the past continues to hold such a powerful grip on the mind. The human brain is not a purely objective processor of events. It interprets experiences through a filter shaped by prior knowledge, emotions, and expectations. Cognitive biases, systematic patterns of deviation from rational judgment, skew perception, memory, and decision-making in ways that reinforce attachment to the past. For example, negativity bias causes individuals to focus more on adverse events than positive ones, giving painful memories disproportionate weight in shaping beliefs and behavior. When combined with rumination, the repetitive, often involuntary replay of past events, these biases create a cycle that strengthens the mind's fixation on experiences that have already occurred, making letting go feel elusive or even threatening. Rumination is particularly effective at anchoring attention to past experiences. Unlike problem solving, which is goal-directed and action-oriented, rumination involves repetitive thinking that rarely reaches a resolution. It is a mental replay of events, decisions, conversations, and interactions, often accompanied by self-criticism, regret, or imagined alternative outcomes. This repetitive pattern engages neural circuits associated with self-referential thought, such as the default mode network, which is active during introspection and mind wandering. Over time, the pathways activated during rumination become strengthened, forming habitual loops that the brain automatically follows when triggered by reminders of the past. The mind comes to anticipate and dwell on these recollections, reinforcing the sense that the past is not truly gone but actively influencing the present. Confirmation bias also plays a significant role in this dynamic. Once the brain forms a narrative about a past event, especially one involving hurt, failure, or loss, it selectively attends to information that supports that narrative while ignoring evidence that contradicts it. For instance, if someone believes a past friendship ended because they were unworthy, they may remember interactions that seem to confirm this belief while discounting moments of support, kindness, or neutrality. This selective attention maintains the emotional intensity of the memory and keeps it active in thought. Over time, confirmation bias transforms isolated events into overarching stories about the self, making detachment from the past psychologically and neurologically more difficult. Catastrophizing is another cognitive bias that strengthens attachment to past experiences. When recalling mistakes, regrets, or losses, the mind often magnifies consequences, imagining them as far more dire or permanent than they actually were. This amplification heightens anxiety and reinforces rumination as the brain interprets the past not only as an unresolved issue but as an ongoing threat. The repetitive mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios keeps neural circuits associated with fear and stress active, further embedding the past into the present experience. Even minor events can acquire exaggerated significance, maintaining emotional and cognitive entanglement with history. Self-referential thinking compounds the effect of these biases. Humans have a natural tendency to interpret experiences in relation to themselves, evaluating past events through the lens of personal worth, identity, and responsibility. This self-focused processing intensifies the emotional charge of memories, particularly negative ones, and perpetuates rumination. When a person repeatedly asks themselves why something happened to them, what they could have done differently, or how the event reflects on their character, the mind remains caught in the past rather than moving forward. This self-centered loop is further reinforced by biases like personalization, which attributes external events disproportionately to one's own actions or failures. The interplay between rumination and cognitive biases also explains why the past can feel more immediate than the present. Each mental rehearsal reactivates emotional and physiological responses associated with the original event. The heart rate may rise, muscles may tense, and stress hormones may surge, creating the illusion that the memory is happening again. This embodied response strengthens the connection between memory and the nervous system, embedding the past into the body as well as the mind. Over time, the combination of rumination, emotional reinforcement, and biased thinking produces a kind of neural stickiness, making detachment psychologically and physiologically challenging. Breaking free from the influence of rumination and cognitive biases requires conscious awareness and deliberate intervention. Mindfulness and meditation help individuals observe thoughts without judgment, allowing memories to arise without automatically engaging in repetitive cycles. Cognitive restructuring techniques challenge distorted interpretations, encouraging alternative perspectives and more balanced appraisals of past events. Journaling provides an outlet for externalizing repetitive thoughts, reducing their grip on internal attention and helping to clarify patterns of bias. Over time, these strategies weaken habitual neural loops, reducing the emotional intensity and frequency of ruminative thought, and opening the possibility for moving forward. Rumination and cognitive biases create a feedback loop in which the past continues to exert influence over the present. Negative experiences are magnified, rehearsed, and interpreted through self-referential and selective lenses, reinforcing attachment and making letting go feel difficult or unnatural. Neural circuits associated with fear, regret, and self-evaluation are strengthened through repetition, while cognitive distortions like confirmation bias and catastrophizing ensure that memories retain their emotional potency. Understanding the mechanisms of these mental processes is crucial for disentangling oneself from the past, as it highlights that the struggle to release memories is not a flaw of willpower, but the result of deeply ingrained patterns of thought and neural reinforcement that require intentional strategies to interrupt. The role of identity and self-narrative is central to understanding why we cannot easily let go of the past. Humans naturally construct stories about themselves to make sense of life experiences, shaping a coherent self concept that provides continuity and meaning. These narratives integrate events, choices, relationships, and emotions into a framework that answers fundamental questions. Who am I? What kind of person do I want to be? How have my experiences shaped me? The past, in this sense, is not just a series of events. It is the foundation upon which the present self is built. Letting go of certain experiences can feel like removing building blocks from the very structure of identity, creating psychological discomfort, confusion, or fear of losing a sense of self. Our identities are deeply tied to formative experiences, particularly those that carry strong emotional significance. Childhood experiences, early relationships, achievements, and failures all contribute to the narrative we carry forward. For example, someone who overcame adversity may define themselves as resilient, while another person who experienced repeated rejection may internalize a sense of inadequacy. In both cases, the past is inseparable from identity because it informs beliefs, behaviors, and expectations. Attempting to let go of the past can feel like erasing these defining moments, threatening the stability and coherence of the self. Self-narratives also provide a framework for meaning, helping individuals interpret life events and assign value to experiences. Painful or unresolved events often become central chapters in these stories because they provide lessons, warnings, or motivations for personal growth. Even when a memory is painful, it can feel necessary for maintaining a coherent understanding of who we are and why we behave as we do. The brain resists discarding these experiences because doing so might create a gap in the story that leaves the individual feeling adrift or incomplete. In this way, attachment to the past is not merely about clinging to memory, but about preserving the narrative continuity that underpins identity. The self-narrative often incorporates a sense of moral or emotional responsibility for past events. People frequently interpret experiences through the lens of personal agency, assigning themselves credit for successes or blame for failures. This internalization reinforces the link between past events and identity because it suggests that letting go would mean absolving oneself of responsibility or denying lessons learned. In cases of trauma or regret, individuals may ruminate on past actions, interactions, or decisions, believing that their character is defined by those moments. The more tightly the past is woven into identity, the more resistant it becomes to being released. Social context plays a critical role in reinforcing self-narratives and attachment to the past. Relationships, cultural expectations, and societal roles often validate and perpetuate the stories we tell ourselves. Family traditions, community interactions, and even social media memories can anchor individuals to their history, confirming the importance of specific experiences and shaping identity around them. The feedback received from others, approval, criticism, or recognition, can strengthen the perception that past events are central to who one is. Letting go in this context can feel like stepping outside the shared narrative, risking alienation or a loss of social validation. Cognitive mechanisms further entrench identity-based attachment to the past. The brain tends to favor consistency, seeking to align new information with existing self-concepts. This is known as self-consistency bias, which leads individuals to interpret experiences in ways that confirm their established identity. Memories that fit the narrative are reinforced, while contradictory information is minimized or ignored. This creates a feedback loop where past experiences continue to shape thought patterns, emotional responses, and behavior, even when they are no longer relevant or beneficial. The mind perceives letting go not as freedom, but as a threat to stability, reinforcing resistance. Narrative therapy and reflective practices provide pathways to disentangle identity from past experiences without erasing their significance. By examining and reframing self-stories, individuals can integrate painful or limiting memories into a broader, more flexible understanding of self. Techniques such as cognitive reframing, journaling, and guided visualization help reinterpret past experiences as learning opportunities rather than defining limitations. This approach preserves the lessons and meaning of the past while loosening its grip on current identity, allowing individuals to move forward with a coherent yet adaptable self-concept. Identity and self-narrative explain why the past often feels inseparable from the present. Memories are not inert, they are active components of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, shaping beliefs, emotions, and behavior. Letting go of past experiences can feel threatening because it challenges the continuity, coherence, and perceived moral or emotional essence of the self. Cognitive biases, emotional investment, and social reinforcement further solidify these attachments, creating a network of neural and psychological patterns that keep the past present. Understanding this connection provides insight into why release requires careful, intentional work that respects the role of the past in shaping identity while allowing space for growth, change, and new narratives. Fear of uncertainty and change is one of the most powerful forces keeping people tethered to the past. Human beings are wired to seek stability, predictability, and safety. The unknown is inherently threatening because it signals a lack of control over one's environment and outcomes. When the past is familiar, even when it is painful, it provides a sense of structure and certainty. Memories of experiences, routines, and relationships, no matter how challenging, become reference points for navigating life. Letting go of the past, by contrast, introduces ambiguity. The future is uncharted, outcomes are unpredictable, and the familiar patterns that once offered comfort are no longer present. This fear of stepping into uncertainty can paralyze decision making and reinforce attachment to past experiences, creating a psychological barrier that prevents individuals from moving forward. The nervous system is closely involved in this resistance to change. The amygdala, which regulates threat detection, becomes highly active when the mind anticipates unknown or potentially risky situations. Even when the logical mind recognizes that releasing the past might be beneficial, the body responds as though danger is imminent. Stress hormones such as cortisol are released, heightening vigilance and activating the fight or flight response. The nervous system interprets uncertainty as a survival threat, signaling the brain to cling to known patterns, namely the past. This physiological response explains why people can intellectually understand the value of letting go while feeling emotionally immobilized, trapped in cycles of thought and behavior that reinforce familiarity over growth. Psychologically, the fear of change often manifests as worry, hesitation, or procrastination. The mind anticipates negative outcomes, imagining scenarios in which letting go leads to failure, rejection, or loss. These projections are often exaggerated by cognitive distortions such as catastrophizing or overgeneralization, making the perceived risks of change seem insurmountable. Ironically, this mental rehearsal keeps the past alive, as the individual continually compares current reality to prior experiences and fears losing the perceived safety of what is known. Even minor disruptions to routine or perspective can trigger intense discomfort, reinforcing the notion that the past, however flawed, is a safer refuge than the unpredictable future. Attachment to the past under fear of uncertainty is further reinforced by the concept of loss aversion. Humans are more sensitive to losses than equivalent gains, a psychological phenomenon documented extensively in behavioral economics. Letting go of past experiences, relationships, or identities is perceived as a form of loss, while the potential benefits of change are uncertain and abstract. The mind prioritizes avoiding loss over pursuing potential growth, even when holding on to the past is clearly limiting. This bias makes emotional detachment difficult because the perceived cost of moving forward feels immediate and tangible, while the reward of embracing change remains hypothetical and distant. Fear of change also interacts with identity and self-narrative. As individuals construct their sense of self around past experiences, releasing them can feel like erasing essential parts of their story. The unfamiliar future challenges the continuity of this narrative, creating a sense of disorientation or existential anxiety. People may cling to the past not simply out of nostalgia or regret, but as a psychological anchor to maintain identity in the face of an uncertain future. The past, even if painful, feels like a known territory where roles, expectations, and behaviors are predictable, whereas stepping forward requires redefining oneself in ways that are inherently risky. Social and cultural factors amplify the fear of uncertainty. Norms, expectations, and comparisons with others create pressure to maintain stability and avoid disruption. Relationships, careers, and social roles are often intertwined with the past, and abandoning familiar patterns can provoke fear of judgment, isolation, or failure. People may hesitate to move forward because doing so feels like stepping outside the collective narrative they are part of, creating tension between personal growth and social conformity. This dynamic ensures that the past remains influential, as releasing it threatens not only internal stability, but also perceived social security. Overcoming the fear of uncertainty requires both cognitive and experiential strategies. Mindfulness and grounding techniques help individuals tolerate discomfort and remain present, reducing the physiological and emotional reactivity associated with the unknown. Cognitive reframing allows for the reinterpretation of uncertainty as opportunity rather than threat, shifting focus from potential loss to potential growth. Gradual exposure to change Experimenting with small steps toward new experiences trains the nervous system to tolerate novelty and reduces the intensity of fear responses. Building self-efficacy through successes, even minor ones, strengthens confidence in the ability to navigate the unknown, making the past less psychologically sticky. The fear of uncertainty and change explains why the past exerts a magnetic pull over the present. Familiar experiences, routines, and identities offer comfort and predictability, while the unknown future triggers physiological, cognitive, and emotional responses associated with threat and risk. Loss aversion, cognitive distortions, identity preservation, and social pressures reinforce this attachment, making letting go psychologically complex. Understanding these mechanisms highlights that moving beyond the past is not a simple act of willpower. It requires intentional practice, tolerance for ambiguity, and a reorientation of the mind and nervous system to perceive the unknown as navigable, meaningful, and capable of growth. When we examine why we cannot let go of the past, it becomes clear that this struggle is woven into the very fabric of our minds, bodies, and identities. From the way memories are encoded and emotionally charged in the brain, to the deep attachments we form to experiences that define us, the past exerts a powerful gravitational pull. Trauma leaves enduring imprints on the nervous system. Rumination and cognitive biases keep thought loops alive, and our self-narratives anchor us to what has already happened. Even the fear of uncertainty and change reinforces the grip of familiarity, making the unknown feel riskier than the comfort of holding on. Letting go, therefore, is not merely a matter of forgetting or summoning willpower. It is a process of understanding, integrating, and gradually disentangling the past from the present. By becoming aware of these mechanisms, we can begin to honor our experiences while reclaiming the freedom to live fully